London's Burning was one of ITV's longest running and most iconic dramas, lighting up front rooms on a Sunday night across the country in record numbers from 1988 all the way through to 2002. Set in the fictional Blackwall Fire Station, the series follows the lives of Blue Watch, a tight-knit crew of London firefighters navigating blazing infernos, personal struggles and the everyday challenges that come with a uniform. Over the years, audiences came to know and love the characters like the no-nonsense Station Officer Nick Georgiadis, the cheeky womaniser Billy Ray, dependable characters of Bayleaf, Recall, Sub-Officer John Hallam and George. There was also plenty of comic relief in the form of characters such as a keen but green young recruit Colin, grounded posh boy Malcolm, the impulsive baritone Sick Note, and plenty of drama from characters such as the hot-headed but well-meaning Kevin and the unwelcome outsider Jeff Poison Pierce, and not forgetting the occasional rose amongst the thorns in the form of their female colleagues such as Josie Ingham, Kate Stevens, Sally Reid and Carol Webb. It mixed humour with tragedy, soap-styled relationships with high-stake rescues, and for many of us it was the first real insight into the world of firefighting. But before it became a staple of Sunday night TV, it all began with a single feature-length movie. But before we dig deep into our review, please take this time to like and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with more movie and TV related videos. And also search for WN Movie Talk podcast on all good podcast platforms for even more in-depth movie analysis. Grittier, leaner and more realistic than the series that followed, the pilot was a raw depiction of fire brigade life in Thatcher's Britain, capturing the camaraderie, the pressures and the quiet courage that defined the job. It laid the foundations for everything that followed and more than holds up today as a compelling drama in its own right, with the firefighting being far more authentic than it ended up being in the later years, when even a toaster fire would end up with an explosion or 8. The London's Burning pilot, penned by the acclaimed screenwriter Jack Rosenthal, was originally conceived as a standalone feature-length drama that aired in December 1986. It introduced viewers to Blue Watch at Blackwall Fire Station, a tight-knit crew of firefighters whose daily lives were anything but predictable. From the opening scenes, it was clear that this wasn't about action for action's sake. It was a grounded look at the pressures and quiet heroism of these brave yet modest men and women. They weren't doing this for the praise or the thrills, but because it had to be done. Rosenthal based the idea on tales regaled to him by a friend of his in the service, as well as stories of firemen coming under attack during the Broadwater Farm riot in London's Tottenham, a tragic event that also saw the brutal murder of a policeman. All of this spurred a concept in Rosenthal's head, and so he wrote the screenplay as a one-off movie. The story unfolds over the course of a few intense days, offering not just a snapshot of the job, but a glimpse into the heart of 1980s London itself. It's not all sirens and blazing infernos. The real drama lies in the balance between life on and off the watch, and the backdrop is a city still finding its feet in the latter half of a turbulent decade, with tensions between minorities and authorities simmering in the background throughout the film. But through it all, Blue Watch remains focused, always ready and always on call. What sets the London's Burning pilot apart is the way it presents the firefighting itself, not with cinematic bombast or adrenaline-pumping music, but with a quiet, almost documentary-like realism. These scenes are stripped of sensationalism. There's no score building tension in the background. Instead, we hear the wheeze of breathing apparatus, the crackle of the flames, the barked but muffled instructions from senior officers. It's immersive because it feels honest. The response then isn't superhuman heroics, but coordinated and precise teamwork and working to bring awareness to the public. Everything about these scenes of rescue speaks to structure and routine, the hallmarks of an operation built on protocol. From how they suit up in a matter of seconds to the way that the engines are packed, uncoiled and positioned at a scene, every movement feels trained and drilled. There's a clear chain of command, a military-like hierarchy where respect for rank is second only to the unspoken procedure and bond between the crewmates. And that's what gives the firefighting scene such real gravitas, the deep, hard-won trust between one another that makes those saves possible. Firefighters, unlike most jobs, are like a family unit, with a closer bond than the characters even share with their own wives and families. It's the recognisable characters that help to lend realism and relatability to the show, which ultimately led to the film's success and therefore the commission for the series that followed. At the heart of Blue Watch is Station Officer Tate, played by James Marcus, perhaps best known as one of Alex's droogs in Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. Here he brings real weight and warmth to the role of Tate, both professional and paternal. His crew respect him, not just because of his rank and years of experience, because they know he's got their backs and he expects the same in return. At his side was Sub-Officer John Hallam, played by Sean Blowers. He's a henpecked husband at home, but at work he's the steady bridge between Tate and the rest of Blue Watch. He's just as comfortable sharing in the lads' antics as he is delivering orders, and he does both with a natural ease and the respect of the crew. John Hazeldine plays Mike Bayleaf Wilson, the dependable and approachable mess manager of Blue Watch. Bayleaf is something of a cornerstone within the crew, where both his opinion and his resolve are highly regarded. Then there's Malcolm, played by Rupert Baker, the so-called posh one of the group. With his public school education and clipped accent, he initially seems like a fish out of water among his blue-collar colleagues at the fire station. But in reality, the opposite is true. Malcolm is just as involved in the hijinks and practical jokes as anyone else. In fact, very often leading the charge. The comic core of Blue Watch comes in the forms of Vaseline, Sick Note and Charisma, three larger-than-life characters whose storylines in later episodes would veer into the downright absurd, but in this original pilot they're instantly recognisable as staples of any blue-collar workplace. Vaseline, the residence ladies' man, is played by comedian Mark Arden, best known as one half of the Oblivion Boys alongside Stephen Frost. In the early 80s, Arden and Frost were regulars in the emerging alternative comedy scene, popping up in cult shows like The Young Ones and Blackadder, and later becoming household names as the face of the hugely popular Carlin Black Label adverts. Vaseline himself is a classic example of the cheeky chancer, chauvinistic and constantly chasing women. His character's been married a handful of times, always bizarrely to women named Marion, and when we first meet him he's moonlighting as a gardener and carelessly flicks a cigarette into a compost heap. Naturally, that night Blue Watch is called out to that very same blaze, and Vaseline can be seen sheepishly hiding in the bushes, hoping no one recognises him. But Sick Note Quigley, played with brilliant comic timing by Richard Walsh, is exactly what his nickname suggests, the station's resident hypochondriac. One of the standout comic moments in the pilot comes when his GP, after an examination, delivers the line, "It's bad news, I'm afraid. I can't write you a sick note." Leslie Charisma Appleby is played by Gerard Haran, a versatile character actor who would later become well known for his role as Terry Seymour, the proud and quietly passionate leader of the Danebury Metal Detecting Club in Mackenzie Crook's BAFTA-winning BBC comedy drama Detectorists. As Charisma, he's Blue Watch's resident fantasist, a harmless but habitual embellisher, constantly spinning exaggerated tales of his exploits to anyone who'll listen. His stories are rarely malicious, but they're always just a little too far-fetched to be believed, and his crewmates often humour him with a knowing eye roll. Also among the cast in this feature-length pilot is a young Jerome Flynn, standing out in one of his earliest roles as firefighter Kenny Rambo Baines. Though he wouldn't return for the full series, his presence adds a little spark to the pilot. Flynn, of course, would go on to find fame in Soldier Soldier and much later global recognition as Bronn the Sellsword in Game of Thrones. Although the pilot never loses sight of the camaraderie at the heart of Blue Watch, the banter, the bickering, the tomfoolery and the pranks, which really do make up some of the greatest scenes, beneath the laughs and the laddish ribbing, the show was quietly holding a mirror up to Britain in the mid-80s. And for all the warmth of the crew, it wasn't always a flattering reflection. Unlike the later years of London's Burning, which gradually lean into more soap-style storylines, the original pilot film, and indeed the early years of the series that followed, struck a very different tone. It was, at its heart, a darkly comic yet sharply observant drama that used the fire station setting not just to explore moments of danger and teamwork, but as a lens through which to examine deeper social issues simmering under the surface. One of the most prominent storylines in the pilot revolves around Josie Ingham, played by Catherine Rogers, a new female firefighter joining a very male-dominated Blue Watch. At the time, the concept of a woman in that role was met with barely concealed hostility, laddish banter and outright sexism. While the pilot deserves credit for tackling this subject, it's fair to say that sexism was rife in these early episodes, presented largely without comment. But Josie's inclusion did offer a glimmer of change and brought welcome complexity to the group dynamic. The show made it clear that being a woman in this environment wasn't just about proving yourself physically, but surviving deeply ingrained cultural biases. Another aspect of London's Burning pilot that really sticks out today, and not in a comfortable way, is the nickname given to the station's single black firefighter, Ethnic. Now, in the context of the show, it's clearly intended as banter. The crew, for whom nicknames are important, are constantly ribbing each other. That's part of the glue that binds them. But observed from today's sensibility, there's an undeniable sting to this certain name. It's not just a nickname, it's a label which almost singles him out. It's a reminder, however casual, of how divisive language and humour once passed without comment. However, it does highlight something that the pilot does very well. It raises issues without resolving them. It puts them on the screen, lets us sit with the discomfort and trusts the audience to think about what it all means without preaching to us in one form or another, as today's media seems to do with an almost authoritarian leaning. In many ways, London's Burning was ahead of its time simply for acknowledging these tensions, even if it didn't have all the answers. But the main through thread of the pilot is the steady build up to the riots in the final act. The scenes that gave the series its title. The riot scenes in the London's Burning pilot are among the most striking and politically charged moments in British television of the 1980s. Set against the backdrop of a city simmering with frustration, these sequences feel less like scripted drama and more like a raw reflection of Thatcher-era Britain, an era marked by rising inequality, inner city tension and a growing disconnect between working class communities and the powers meant to serve them. The chaos unfolds not as random anarchy, but as the inevitable spark from a society left dry and angry by austerity, unemployment and years of perceived neglect. As bricks are thrown and sirens wail, we're reminded that London itself is a kind of pressure cooker, a tinderbox where one wrong move can ignite fury. A manifestation of everything that was coming apart at the seams: underfunded community, rising unemployments, cultural alienation and the widening gulf between authority and the people on the ground. The blazes tearing through the estates and alleyways weren't just destroying buildings, they were symbolic of trust being burned away as well. In the midst of this, the fire brigade, typically seen as neutral protectors, find themselves caught in a moral and literal crossfire. Thrust into this epicentre of chaos, they are no longer simply lifesavers. In the eyes of the rioters, wearing a uniform now makes them a visual part of the system, and that system is seen as broken. The brigade becomes both target and saviour, public service and public scorn. It's a powerful twist that reframes the firefighter not just as a hero running into the flames, but as a frontline responder in a burning society. This pilot was a rare thing, a drama about bravery that didn't need to shout. It simply lit the match and let the realism burn. So if you're a fan of this pilot movie, then please let me know in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into classic movies from the past, and check out WN Movie Talk over on most podcast platforms. Thank you for watching. I'll see you again soon. Cheers.